Hey guys, Ryan Hamer here. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Today we're going to be talking about what happens when you pay a collection item. So everybody wonders, should I pay it? Shouldn't I pay it? Well, the thing is, I always say, if you don't care about what happens, then sure, just pay it. But here's the thing. Once you pay that collection, you got to understand there's no difference between an unpaid collection and a paid collection. If you just do the transaction with the collection agent, insofar as that you say, all right, whatever I owe you, I'll pay it. Done. That's it. You don't negotiate a lower amount. You don't negotiate a pay for delete. You just pay it straight. So what happens? Well, the collection agent gets his commission. Company's happy, whatever. They've most likely inflated the amount with interest, or they've also just, they've added fees on top of it. So in some cases, you're paying more than you would have if you had initially paid the debt, if you owed it, right? And that's what happens. But also, on your credit bureau report, it's listed as a derogatory item still, regardless of whether you settle it, regardless of whether you pay it in full. It will show as paid. However, it is still listed as a derogatory item. It is still considered a derogatory item, and it still affects your credit score the same way. So people are wondering, okay, I paid this creditor off, I paid this collection off. Why the heck hasn't my credit score gone up? What's going on here? Some people go and get loans. Some people break into piggy banks, and they take money from other stuff, and they use credit cards or whatever. And what happens is your score doesn't move, or it moves just a tiny bit. Because what? It's not shown as owing, but it's still derogatory. So I want you guys to understand that when you go pay off a creditor, you have to make proper arrangements. Negotiate a pay for delete. That's very important. And the thing about a pay for delete, it's not always going to be accepted. They're going to tell you, the creditor's going to tell you all sorts of stuff about, oh no, we don't do that. We can't do that. It is possible, not with every creditor, but this is where you have to determine a couple of things, right? Should I leave it on? When was the date of last payment? So that's something you definitely need to know. When is the date of last payment? Because that determines, that makes a big difference. It determines whether you should decide to leave it on or whether you should remove it. I had a client who came to me with a collection item that they were able to get off of one credit bureau report, but they weren't able to get it. They were able to get it off of Equifax. Amazing, right? Because Equifax is always, very difficult to deal with at times, right? So, but the thing is, they weren't able to get it off of TransUnion. So TransUnion is being a stickler, and they're holding on to it. So their credit score is like hovering, still sitting within the high 600s. And they can't break that 700 mark. They can't break that 700 barrier. So they're like, well, what do I do? What do I do? And I said, okay, well, listen. Let's take a look. Do you know when the date of last payment was? They're like, I don't know. And I said, well, did you contact the creditor? They said, well, yes, I did. And I said, okay, well, what did they say? Oh, they're not willing to negotiate. And Ryan, it's 2 times the amount of the original debt. It was initially like $1,100, and now it's like over $3,000. And I'm like, well, don't pay that. Don't pay that. Let's take a look at your credit. Let's take a look at your credit bureau report and check the dates. So of course, there's nothing on Equifax because it's been removed. But luckily, they had a screenshot of when the debt was initially on Equifax. So they checked TransUnion, and they could see that the debt. And oh, that's another thing I'm going to get into. I'll probably do another video about it, about the display on the credit bureau report, because it can be really tricky and misleading. So anyway, it says date reported 2017 or 2016, something like that. I think it's 2016. No, 2017. So let's do the math, right? If we do the math, we're at like 6 or 7 years. Like, sorry, I'm distracted. So yeah, so let's just say, I'm just remembering the situation. So it was about 6 years. So 6 years in August. Yes, 6 years in August. And I said, dude, why didn't you take a look at your credit bureau report sooner before you even called them? I hope you didn't acknowledge the debt. I hope you didn't say that it was yours. And I'm like, oh, well, no, I didn't. And I said, you sure? They said, yes, I'm sure. I didn't say that it was mine. I didn't admit it. I just wanted to know whether they were willing to work with me. Because, you know, I said, yeah, but remember, credit bureaus are different. Creditors and collection agencies are different. Remember, we talked about how you have contingency debt and owned debt. So the collection agency might not own the debt. So they don't have the power to be able to swing certain things. They don't have the power to say, all right, you know what, we'll cut it down to this amount, or we'll do a pay for delete. If they own the debt where they purchased it from the original creditor, then they have the power to do that. And some of these guys might get greedy, and they might just say, well, no, we've already inflated the debt $2,000 more than what you originally owed. So we're going to make you pay that amount. Right? And so they might not be willing to flex. And sometimes it depends on the person you get on the other end, right? So sometimes they're willing to work with you, sometimes they're not. Like I think I told you guys in another video, there are these guys that can be really rude. Like one guy said, oh, it's not, this is collections, it's not customer service. Essentially saying, I don't have to be nice to you. I don't have to be friendly to you. And so what you do is you always try to keep your cool. But the purpose of this video is really to talk about like what happens when you pay off these creditors. If you're doing it for your own peace of mind, that's not helping your credit score. That's not helping your credit profile. Because I'm telling you, it shows as a derogatory item. It also shows as paid. You have to differentiate and decide how important is it that you have that debt paid, and what is your goal, right? If you want to buy a house, if you have an immediate need for no derogatory items, or I shouldn't say that. If you have an immediate need to have your credit report clear of any items that you owe, because, for example, if you're trying to go get a mortgage tomorrow, they're not really gonna work with you if you got collection items there that are outstanding. Because think about it, would you lend money to somebody that owes money to somebody else? Right? And they didn't pay back? So that's where the issue is. You got to decide what's important to you. Now, the almighty pay for delete. You try to negotiate a pay for delete. You try to say, hey, listen, if I can pay, if we were able, is there a way that we can work out a situation in which X amount is paid and you were able to remove the item from my credit bureau report if we can come to an agreement or an arrangement? They will most likely tell you no. Somebody inexperienced will most likely tell you no, and they'll tell you foolishness like, oh, it's illegal to do that. No, it's not illegal. These guys have power to do that, to remove it. Creditors, collection agencies have power to remove a debt from the credit bureau, because what happens if it's an issue of fraud? What happens if, you know, identity theft and stuff like that? What if it truly and isn't you? If it wasn't you and if it isn't you? And what happens if you got court documentation, you filed a police report, you have all that stuff, and you've done all that stuff? What happens if you have an affidavit stating that it wasn't you, right? So if you have they're obligated to report, they're obligated to only furnish accurate information on your credit bureau file. There are federal laws that prevent institutions and organizations from furnishing inaccurate information about you. It's a privacy issue. So just keep that in mind. Next time you're dealing with a collection agency and the question comes up or somebody asks you, is it important? Is it better for me to leave it on or take it off? Well, again, remember, just to recap, there are certain factors. When was the date of last payment? Right? Is it 6 or 7 years? Are we close to that threshold? Because when that threshold comes, right, it's going to drop off your credit bureau report. Not saying these creditors can't call you or try and contact you, but they can't furnish your credit bureau report for a debt that is older than, you know, that period of time, right? We have the statute of limitations. Remember, I always talk about the statute of limitations for your particular province or state or whatever. You have to keep that in mind too. I'm in Ontario. Statute of limitations is 2 years. So if the original creditor did not sue me within the first 2 years, then they can't take me to court and get my money. However, they can sell the debt. They've written it off. They sell the debt over to a collection agency who is collecting that debt for pennies on the dollar. Well, I mean, they've purchased that debt for pennies on the dollar. Normally, they purchase these debts in batches, so there's not that much information. And depending on the relationship and depending on how much they paid or whatever, they may or may not have that much information about you. And more often than not, they don't have your original signature signed document. Okay? So keep that in mind when you're negotiating. You most likely can get somebody who will be willing to flex with you, even if it's just to lower the amount or whatever. Just remember, if you do make a payment and it's not an arrangement for them to remove the item from your credit bureau report, then it's still going to show as negative. It's still going to reflect negatively. And if they say that they can remove the item from your credit bureau report, if they are willing to do that arrangement with you, make sure, always, always, always get it in writing. Too many times people come to me and they say, hey, you know what, Ryan, I did what you said. I contacted, they said that they do it, and I paid them, and they never did it. Well, yeah, because you didn't get anything in writing. I always say, get everything in writing. You create a trail with them, an email trail. Go back and forth with them and have, get a document signed off on a manager or get an email or something that says, yes, if you pay X, we will make sure that it is removed from both credit bureaus as per this arrangement or agreement. And they can do that, right? They can do that. They can do that. Anyhow, thanks again for taking the time to watch this video. Please like, share, and comment. And don't give up. Credit is like a rubber band. It can bounce back. Have a good one, y'all.